What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and when I heard Walmart was selling gaming laptops for around $500 with pretty decent specs, I knew I had to pick one up and check it out. If you don't know, Walmart has an in-house brand called EVOO that consists of a number of different laptops, including the one we're looking at today. These range from $150 netbooks up to gaming laptops that cost well over $1,000. This one is their entry-level 15.6-inch gaming model and comes in at $530. On paper, this sounds like a great price with it sporting a modern Intel i5 CPU, an SSD boot drive, and a dedicated graphics card. With that being said, specs don't tell the whole story, which is why today we're going to be unboxing, testing out, and giving you the rundown on whether or not you should pick one of these up. But before we get into all of that, I want to take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, Corsair, and their new K55 RGB Pro XT. This new $75 gaming keyboard from Corsair offers a ton of features for the money. It's a full-size board with 6 dedicated macro keys, a detachable palm rest, dedicated media keys, and the list goes on. One of the best things about this keyboard is the dynamic per-key RGB lighting that is fully customizable through the iCUE software. To learn more about the K55 RGB Pro XT and to pick one up for yourself, make sure to head to the link in the description, and thanks again to Corsair for sponsoring this video. Getting back to the laptop, it comes packaged in this stylized box that features large EVOO branding and touting stuff like the THX audio and the inclusion of Microsoft Game Pass, which we'll talk about both of those later. Opening it up, the first thing we find is the laptop itself, a little baggie, and this brown box. Inside of the box is just the power adapter along with its detachable power cable. Inside of the bag is a customer support card, quick start guide, warranty info, and some little screws that look like they might be for M.2 drives, but I wasn't 100% sure when first opening this up. The laptop came protected in pretty thick closed cell foam, which is nice to see, especially on a laptop this inexpensive. Pulling it out of the foam and out of the bag, I was greeted by the laptop itself, which had plastic on the top, and opening it up had more protective plastic on the inside bottom bar and trackpad. This led to a few satisfying plastic peels, and while I was concerned these were covering glossy surfaces, in actuality both of these areas are a soft touch matte plastic. Once this was done, I was ready to boot the system up for the first time. Pressing the power button booted the system up into the normal Windows setup screen, where I set things up, then was brought into Windows. I began by taking a look at the pre-installed software and was happy to see no major bloatware. The only things other than the default apps and drivers were the EVOO Control Center and some THX software. Luckily, there wasn't anything like intrusive antivirus software pre-installed. Then I just looked for and performed updates for both Windows and the Nvidia graphics card. With that done, I was ready to start downloading games, but before we talk about performance, I want to go over all of the specs. For $500-ish, this has some pretty good specs on paper. The CPU is an Intel i5 10300H. This is a 4-core, 8-thread CPU with a base and boost clock of 2.5 and 4.5 GHz respectively. Thanks to the race for more and more cores, even entry-level i5 laptops now have 8 threads, which is awesome for gaming and even light workstation applications. For the graphics card, this laptop is using the Nvidia Gtx 1650. I haven't tested the mobile 1650 before now, so I was pretty excited to see its performance. This is 4 GB of video memory, and from what I've read online, it actually only performs about 10% worse than its desktop counterpart, which is pretty impressive. The one core spec that is a bit of a letdown is the RAM. This laptop is using 8 GB of memory, and when opening the task manager, it shows that it's a single stick running at 2933 MHz. The boot drive is actually a 256 GB NVMe SSD, and we'll be taking a closer look at both the SSD and RAM when we open this up in a minute. In terms of a screen, this laptop is rocking a 15.6-inch 1080p display running at 60 Hz. I've looked online and have not been able to find the actual specifications of this display, so I'm not entirely sure what type it is. But it gets reasonably bright and has decent viewing angles, so it's likely a VA or cheap IPS panel. If any of you can confirm what panel type it is, let me know in the comments below. With all that being said, I think the display is fine, nothing special, but it gets the job done, and you can always hook it up to an external monitor for gaming at home. For the keyboard, it has this kind of odd layout with a number pad to the right, It's got basic RGB backlighting, and I actually like this keyboard a lot. It's relatively tactile, there's a decent amount of travel, and overall, just like the screen, it gets the job done. The trackpad is fine, it's not glass or anything, but it tracks well, and multi-touch gestures also work fine. With that being said, I would definitely recommend having an external mouse whenever possible. For ports, this laptop is pretty well equipped, and the layout is almost perfect in my opinion. The left side has a USB 3 Type A port, headphone and mic jacks, as well as a LAN port. The right side has 2 more USB 3 Type A ports and an SD card reader, which is a nice addition. On the back of the laptop is an HDMI port, 2 mini display ports, a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type C port, and the power input. This is awesome that all of these ports are in the back because you can just plug these in when you're docked at home and don't have to worry about them getting in the way. Also, having the option for up to 3 displays is pretty cool in my opinion. The only thing I think I would change about this layout is also moving the LAN port to the back, again just to get it out of the way, but other than that I really don't have any complaints, especially considering the $530 price for this machine. In terms of build quality, nothing about this laptop feels premium, but it does feel pretty solid. There's a bit of deck flex, but overall I don't think it looks or feels super cheap. In terms of branding, there's an EVOO logo on the back of the screen and a logo/brand name on the top left of the keyboard. The only other thing visible when using it is the Intel and Nvidia stickers, which can easily be removed if you don't like them. Overall, I like the look of this laptop. It's sleek, clean, and doesn't try too hard to have a quote-unquote gamer aesthetic. It is a little thick at just under an inch and weighs about 4.4 pounds, which isn't too heavy in my opinion. So with all that talked about, let's flip it over and get inside. On the bottom, you can see there's a bunch of vents along with rubberized feet that do a good job of lifting the laptop up, allowing for decent airflow. Getting inside of this thing is more difficult than it should be in my opinion, and you have to break a warranty sticker to do it, which is annoying. You remove 10 screws, then instead of the bottom panel just lifting off, you have to release a bunch of clips. I was super careful and used plastic pry tools to do this to ensure I wouldn't break any of the clips. Lifting the panel off, we're greeted by the internals of the laptop in all of their glory. You can see the cooling system up top with 2 fans and 2 main heat pipes that the CPU and GPU share. At the bottom is the 4100 mAh battery, there's an Intel Wi-Fi and Bluetooth card, and in the center and center left is the RAM and storage areas. For RAM, there are 2 DIMM slots. One is populated by a single 8GB stick of Gold Key DDR4 with 1 slot open. I would definitely recommend upgrading to 16GB, and I actually benchmarked this system with 8 and 16GB, so you'll be able to see that in the benchmark section of the video. For storage, again, this is using a 256GB unbranded NVMe SSD. From what I've read, this guy does draw a lot of power, but it's overall fine. What's nice is there's a second M.2 slot and even a 2.5-inch SATA cage, meaning you could pack a lot of storage in this guy if you really wanted to. With it closed back up, it's now time to talk about performance, temps, noise, and battery life. Starting with battery life, honestly, it's not all that great. You can expect to get 3 or 4 hours of general use with this, assuming you don't have the brightness super high, and if you're gaming, then that time will be cut into a fraction of that. This is to be expected and isn't a deal breaker for a lot of people, but is something to keep in mind and means you need to be diligent about having your charger with you when on the go. So now let's talk about the part that most of you have been wanting to see, which is the benchmarks. For gaming benchmarks, I tested 6 games, and this initial set of benchmarks are for the laptop in its stock configuration with 8GB and with games running on an external SSD connected through USB. Let's start things off with Fortnite, which I tested at 1080p Pro settings, which for me is epic view distance, high textures, and pretty much everything set to low. Doing this resulted in a 112 FPS average with 1% lows of 41. This was honestly pretty decent performance and probably would be good enough for casual to light competitive play. Next up is CSGO, which I tested at 1080p Pro settings. Doing this in a deathmatch on Dust 2 resulted in the FPS staying in the upper 100s most of the time. This was pretty good performance in my opinion and should be good enough for most casual and a lot of competitive players. I next tested Rainbow Six Siege at 1080p high settings and used the built-in built-in benchmark. Doing this resulted in a 182 FPS average with 1% lows of 145. This again would be perfect for even competitive play. For Cod Warzone, I tested at 1080p with a mix of medium and low settings, and overall it was playable with an 80 FPS average and 44 for the 1% lows, but you definitely could see the limitations of the 8GB of RAM in terms of stuff like the amount of textures the game was able to load in, making things look pretty bad. For AAA titles, I tested both Borderlands 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn at 1080p using the medium preset for both. For Borderlands 3, the system put out a 63 FPS average with 1% lows of 39. For Horizon Zero Dawn, the system put out a 57 FPS average with 1% lows of 28. These both were pretty good results considering these are modern AAA titles, and shows that most any game is able to run at 60 FPS on the system if you're willing to play around with the settings. Finally, I tested GTA 5 at 1080p very high settings using the built-in benchmark and saw a 116 FPS average with 1% lows of 52. As you can see, performance is pretty good, but I was interested to see how it would perform with an extra 8GB of RAM. Now, I did have a 16GB kit of 3200 MHz SODIMM RAM, but I decided to leave in the existing stick and just add one new RAM stick, as this would be the most economical way to upgrade. So I opened up the laptop again and installed an extra 8GB stick. Turning the PC back on, it booted right into Windows and detected both RAM sticks, but they were running a little bit slow at 2666 MHz compared to the 2933 MHz the single 8GB stick was running at. Doing this upgrade only gave about a 5% improvement in a lot of these games, and overall didn't change the experience that much. The two games that really saw performance increases were Fortnite and Cod Warzone. Fortnite saw a substantial jump up in average and 1% lows, which was great to see, and in Cod Warzone the raw numbers didn't change much, but the way it looked improved substantially, which you can really see in stuff like trees and foliage. With all that being said, upgrading the RAM to 16GB is still a very good idea, even if you don't play Battle Royale games, because once you add in stuff like Discord and Spotify running in the background, that 8GB is really going to start to hold you back. In terms of temps and noise, things weren't really that bad. While gaming, the CPU stayed in the mid 60s to low 70s most of the time, with the GPU staying in the mid 70s to low 80s most of the time. This is more than acceptable for a laptop in my opinion, and shows that the cooling system is doing a decent job. In terms of noise, this was also an area that impressed me. It really wasn't much louder than a standard desktop gaming PC, and here's a quick sample. So right now I have the laptop going through a gaming benchmark, and I'm speaking at kind of a regular conversation level, so this should give you a good idea of what kind of noise this is outputting, and as you can see, it's really not overpowering my voice or anything. Like I said before, this is THX branding on a lot of the packaging, and this is just because THX tuned the audio on this laptop, but honestly it doesn't sound amazing. It's pretty average, to be honest. Now let's take a look at the webcam. So here's an example of the built-in webcam and microphone, just to give you guys an idea of what it's like. As you can tell, it's not very good, but it's kind of to be expected at this price point. Finally, on the box, it touts this comes with Xbox Game Pass, but it's just a 1-month trial, so I don't really see that as a huge selling point. Overall, this laptop is good. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, and the big letdown with the RAM is something that can be upgraded with relative ease. Given the performance, price, and upgradability of this laptop, I can honestly and easily recommend this. Now, the $530 pricing is its current price on Walmart.com, but I will also link to it on Amazon and Newegg in case current pricing is better on those sites. So as you can see, I definitely like the laptop, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think of it. Make sure to let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you want to see more laptop videos in the future. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.